Home Alone was huge in the early 90s. It did gangbusters at the box office, launched the career of Chris Columbus, catapulted Macaulay Culkin into overnight superstardom, and spawned a direct sequel as well as a slew of semi-related standalone sequels and spin-offs. But we're here to talk about the video games based on the first two films, starting with Home Alone on NES. It's possible not only to lose a life, but to game over, only seconds after starting this game. That's right, one life, no continues. Why is that? Well, because there is almost nothing to this game. It'd be the understatement of the century to call it short. More accurately, it barely exists at all. This is a game with one level. I shit you not, you can see the entire game in less than a minute.
1 minute!
The only game mechanics are moving to the left and right, climbing stairs, picking up traps, and dropping them. That's it. No jumping, no sprinting, no ducking, no crouching. You can hide behind furniture, but it doesn't really seem to do anything. I got caught here even while trying to hide. Maybe I did something wrong. Or maybe it's a glitch. The latter wouldn't surprise me since you can somehow end up walking backwards. To top it off, there are 2 enemies in the entire game. After playing it for a few minutes, I thought I had to be missing something, and checked out the manual to ensure I wasn't being punked. And, well, I'm not going to do a run-through of the whole thing, but it confirmed all of my suspicions about the game, and whoever wrote it seemingly felt the need to basically apologize. No joke. It acknowledges the lack of content by posing the question, but are 2 enemies not enough for you? Actually, yeah, now that you ask, 2 enemies are not enough. Then it goes on to misspell the word surprise, and talk up Harry and Marv's AI by describing them as extremely intelligent villains. Because that's exactly how anyone who saw the movie would have described those 2 characters, alright. Extremely intelligent. I know what some of you are thinking. Oh, of course it's short and low effort. All movie tie-in games were like that. No. Even in terms of typical low-effort licensed NES games, this one is uniquely sparse in terms of what you get. One button grabs traps, the other button drops traps. You move left and right and go up and down stairs, and you hide behind furniture. 2 enemies. 1 level. That's the entire game. Show me another movie tie-in game on NES that gave people less than this. I dare you. This game was released in 1991, and even if it had came out when the system first launched, back in 1985, when many of the titles were arcade-style, one step above Atari-type games, it would have still been lacking in comparison. By 91, charging $50 US for this game, and yes, that is what it retailed for, in 1991 dollars, was nothing more than a cruel, sick joke. A game like Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link had a gargantuan open-world map to explore, full of green pastures, sandy seasides, spooky graveyards, and massive mountain ranges, with dozens of palaces, caves, and towns to go to, a boatload of different enemies, all with different fighting styles and strengths and weaknesses, and at least like 8 different bosses, along with items to collect, all with different purposes, spells to learn, all with different purposes, and a combat system that allowed for stabbing high, stabbing low, blocking high, blocking low, down thrusting and up thrusting your sword, and casting spells. And that's just scratching the surface. And it came out 4 years earlier, and retailed for the same price. Super Mario Bros. 3 had almost 100 levels, compared to the 1 found here, and that came out 3 years earlier. Home Alone looks like an Atari game in comparison, and a shitty one at that. All of the traps are the same in terms of cause and effect. I think some maybe put the enemies down slightly longer, but at the end of the day, you just drop them and wait, all the same. The graphics on them barely resemble what they're supposed to be. Another comparison to Atari. In fact, the whole game looks like an ugly Microsoft Paint composition. With only one level and 2 enemies, you probably guessed already that it had to be ridiculously hard. Some of that difficulty is intentional, I'm sure, but a lot of it falls on lousy controls. Despite the fact that charging $50 for it was highway robbery, I could nonetheless see this game being passably entertaining for short periods of time, if the controls were not so sluggish and finicky. You're slower than both of the enemies, and the controls are not precise at all around the stairs. I got caught so many times specifically because I couldn't get Kevin to lock on and climb. In a game where seconds matter, this is a fatal flaw that absolutely kills any enjoyment that may have otherwise been feasible to suck from this empty husk. It's very easy to run out of traps, and they barely put the bandits down for any real amount of time anyway. And that reminds me that I wish that there were some level of ingenuity involved in crafting these traps. In a movie full of improvised gadgets, all unique from one another, they didn't even attempt to make these creative in any way. See item, pick up item, drop item. That's fucking it. The bandits' movement just seems so random, too. If one or both of them end up on your tail as soon as you start playing, shaking them can seem like a no-go, since as I've stated already, they are way faster than you are. They can also come at you from 2 angles, another thing that makes escape nearly impossible. It's hard to get anywhere because they show up so quickly sometimes. I hid in the tree once, got bored waiting out the clock, then got caught almost immediately after. So yeah, the most efficient way to reach the end goal, which is avoiding the bandits for 20 minutes until the police arrive, seems to be to just run away from them and find a safe zone to wait out the clock, like a victory formation in an American football game. Because that's a lot of fun, right? Imagine playing Madden or some other football game and just doing kneel downs again and again. This isn't even a stealth game where you sneak around and try to achieve goals. Because there are no fucking goals! You just run around in circles and hope to not get caught. No marker that you have to reach, no missions to accomplish, no nothing. Speaking of genre designations, pretty much the only interesting thing about this piece of junk is that in terms of its mechanics, it's possibly the purest survival horror game that I've ever played. Seriously, this is definitionally survival horror before the term was ever coined. It has every mechanical hallmark of the genre, from the emphasis on scavenging and resource management, albeit only one resource, to all the enemies being much more powerful than you are, all 2 of them, and the only goal in the game is evasion. That's survival horror to a T. Hell, even thematically. It's about a home invasion. But I imagine that if someone tried to defend this indefensible game, they'd likely say that the movie doesn't offer much material that lends itself to a game adaptation. That's true, but it's more of an argument for why a tie-in game should not have been made in the first place than it is for anything else. Let's face it, this really isn't even a movie adaptation at all, because it's only based on one scene. It's a movie scene adaptation. It's not easy to come up with concepts for a Home Alone video game, but to me, the best option, if it simply must have existed, would have been to go the action puzzler route. A game in the vein of Adventures of Lolo or Solomon's Key. Both of those games had already come out well before Home Alone, so the hardware of the NES would have clearly been up to the challenge. Developing games like this for the system was trivial because even the Game Boy had plenty of decent, good, or even great games in the niche, such as Mole Mania or Amazing Penguin. We could have had a game built from a top-down perspective, full of a bunch of one-screen levels, all based around a room in the McAllister home. Add in manipulatable environments with furniture to push around and open or block paths, heaters, fans, and lamps to reposition, wires to drag, and traps to build, and deploy while the enemies pace back and forth and must be avoided. Winning a level would involve stunning the bad guys to make a break for the door and escape to the next level. A game built on cause and effect puzzles, like Lolo. If I put this here and move that, then this will fall and this enemy will be kaput. That's essentially the third act of the movie anyway. Instead, we got no puzzle solving at all, in any form, and barely any strategy. No jumping either, or cutscenes.
You get Nothing!
The graphics suck, the controls suck, the music is stock, generic, and irritating. Everything about this game assaults my senses. In my book, one of the absolute worst in the NES library, and that is one hell of an accomplishment. Because as much as we all love the NES, we have to admit, the bottom of the barrel for that console is pretty damn hideous. Guess who developed this shit stain? Bethesda. I swear on my life I am not making that up. Even if you must insist that it's not one of the worst, it's easily one of the most insulting. It is inexcusable that this was sold at full price in 1991. After the release of Zelda 2, Super Mario Bros. 3, Castlevania 3, Baseball Stars, Crystalis, Tetris, Dr. Mario, Metroid, Adventures of Lolo 1, 2, and 3, Dragon Warrior 1, 2, 3, and 4, with Tecmo Super Bowl right around the corner only 2 months later. Take that $50 and light it on fucking fire, because that way you'll at least get to watch something burn, and it'll entertain you longer than Home Alone on the NES. The Game Boy version released 1 month later, and holy shit, a cutscene, he said the line. You can jump, and crouch, and your movement has momentum to it. You get a weapon, you can interact with environments. There's cross-screen platforming. I was shocked. This game was developed by Imagineering rather than Bethesda, and it's totally different from the NES version. I had no idea what I was doing when I first started playing it, but hey, at least it resembles a game. I had to read the manual once again, and this one is actually a sequel to the movie rather than an adaptation, coming out before the movie got an actual sequel. That's actually not a bad idea. At the very least, it allows the game to have more than 2 enemies. The primary goal is to collect valuables from the McAllister household and dump them down the chute to prevent them from being stolen by the bandits. There's no real logic here, because most of the time there's no race to get to the valuables before someone else does, and most of the enemies are non-aggressive. The only time they spring for an item is if the item was hidden at first, and you reveal it before setting a trap like you're supposed to. So it's kinda trial and error. You can't always attack or escape in an enemy encounter, can sometimes trap yourself, and can't always jump on things that you think you'd be able to. The controls can be very particular for what you need to do, like when you have to jump from the chair to the nightstand instead of directly to the nightstand. So yeah, the game doesn't make that much sense conceptually, and the controls are off. But while the variety of traps is still lacking, they're implemented way better than they were on the NES version. And despite this game's overall mediocrity, it's The Witcher 3 compared to the one on NES. That one had so many problems, whereas this would easily be a passable Game Boy game if only the controls were tighter. Another month later, and Home Alone came to the Super Nintendo. This one's also from Imagineering, and it's basically a souped-up version of the Game Boy game. It's of course nicer to look at, and also more playable, but at the same time, expectations for a SNES title are much higher than for a Game Boy title. I discovered in this version that you're supposed to mash the button to make Kevin's water pistol stun the enemies. When I was playing on Game Boy, I couldn't figure out why it was so useless. Well, that's why. Even so, it'll make enemies double over, but if one stray pixel collides, you'll take a hit. Again, this is playable, but very shallow and mindless, and the opening cutscene uses apostrophes incorrectly. It took a whole year after the release of the NES, Game Boy, and Super Nintendo titles before Home Alone came to the Sega Genesis. This is once again a totally unique game, and clearly the one that had the greatest amount of effort put into it. It's just not fun, at least not to me. Kevin's defending the whole neighborhood this time around instead of just his house, so you have to go door to door and lay traps for when the robbers come. But there doesn't seem to be any way to know which house they'll go to, other than by just following their van. But then, it's too late to set traps. And if you end up in the house with not enough traps, your weapon will run out of ammo really quickly. I can't say that I enjoyed this game at all, even though it's probably not that bad. Tie-ins for the first Home Alone movie were also released for Sega Game Gear and Sega Master System, and for Amiga and MS-DOS computers. I don't really cover those platforms on this channel, I just thought I should mention them before moving on to Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, a title and subtitle that contradict one another. This time we'll be looking at the SNES version first. And would you look at that, it's possible to lose a life literally instantly. I'm talking as soon as the opening cutscene is over. What a great start, considering it's reminding me of that god-awful NES game. This is another pretty mindless one, yet at the same time, nothing is self-explanatory. I had no idea what to do when I reached this elevator. At first I thought I was supposed to get in. Then I thought it was a boss battle of some kind and I was just supposed to avoid the luggage until it ended. It's pretty easy to do if you jump onto the trash can, but to land on it, your positioning must be pixel perfect. Anyway, that strategy was taking forever, so I decided again to try to get in, which wasn't correct either. You're supposed to call for the other elevator, which I had already tried before, but the thing is, you have to hit the button about 1,000,000 times before it eventually comes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and I have no idea what the overall object of the game is. Kevin's big ability here is that he can slide on his knees like Pete Townsend. It's unclear what enemies and obstacles can be taken out using this maneuver and what ones can't. You can also get projectile weapons. And what is the first thing most people do with their weapons when they first get them? That's right, test them. But this only has 3 shots, so you end up wasting it. The pearl necklace, from the movie, makes an appearance, but it's difficult to use. Sometimes it seems like getting hit is just totally unavoidable. Just a very poorly designed and unfun game from top to bottom. Home Alone 2 on the NES is the same game as it was on Super Nintendo, but with smaller levels and significantly worse graphics, sound, and controls. It's hilarious that Kevin can get a gun in a lot of these games. Remember the part in the movie where Kevin runs around the hotel, shooting everyone in sight with a gun? The pearl necklace simply does not work at all on this old broad. You have to do the Townsend slide with split-second timing. Or shooter. Speaking of the Townsend slide again, it is such a bizarre thing to include because I'm pretty sure nothing like that ever happens in the film. Kevin's hair looks like a helmet, or like the hair of a certain fellow who had a cameo in the movie. It's way more difficult to call the elevator in this version, and I don't think that's a design choice, but rather just poor programming. As bad as this game is, watching Kevin take out the suitcases with his knees might be one of the funniest animations I've ever seen on the console. The SNES game was lousy, but this, it borders on being unplayable. The Game Boy version? It's the same shitty game downgraded yet again, as if they were searching for rock bottom. The Townsend slide is so slow, and jumping is like being in low gravity. The less said about this garbage, the better. The Sega version once again came out a whole year later, is once again totally different, and is once again arguably the best version. Despite the creepy opening cutscene, it's certainly the most visually appealing. Given the competition though, best ain't really saying much. I'm not sure why random people at the airport want to hurt Kevin. Maybe because the alternative was having 2 enemies? But even setting logic aside, how did this guy deal a hit when I was up on the couch? Because 1 pixel collided? It's hard to jump over these guys if they're too close together, and attacking them is a pain in the ass too, since your default weapon is this arching rock thing, and getting a hit deploys their briefcase that you have to dodge. If you attack them from the back, you can't run too quickly or else you'll collide with it. Such bad design choices. The object of this one, I think, is to collect gadget parts to eventually fight the bandits. I think. I tried forever to find a way to jump up here to get this slingshot part, and even tried, for an embarrassingly long time, to knock it down with the rock. What you're actually supposed to do is use one of the controller's buttons to push this item that there's no indication that you can push, to hoist yourself up. When you pass the security checkpoint, you'll get utterly swarmed by cops. The enemies in this game are some of the most relentless I've ever seen, and the knockback is absolutely bonkers. I can't say I recommend this game on any level, despite it being better than the Super Nintendo, NES, and Game Boy versions of Home Alone 2 in just about every way. There was also a DOS release. If you want to tell me how it is, by all means, sound off. So there you have it. These games range from lazy and mediocre to absolutely abysmal. I think most of us dig the Home Alone movies, so let's just stick with watching those to get ourselves in the mood for the holidays. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if so, I hope you'll subscribe and ring the bell to keep up with future videos. Please consider giving a thumbs up if you think I've earned it, and if you celebrate Christmas, I'd like to wish you a merry one. If not, I wish you a fantastic Thursday. This has been a Leaky Faucet review. Thanks for watching.